Hello everyone, and welcome back to Killer Shrew Fans Killer Toy Reviews, and I hope you are all doing well. If for whatever reason you are not doing well, then I have something to take your blues away. It's this! The new for 2020 Safari Ltd Edmontosaurus. Now, when the promo images were released for the upcoming lineup, this was far and away my absolute favorite that was revealed. Not only that, it was honestly one of the few I could feel myself getting excited for. I don't know, maybe I was just in a bad headspace back then, but this was the only one really doing anything for me. And now that I finally have it, I can honestly say it was worth the wait, and I was right to be excited for it. This model is big, beautiful, and just all around a triumph from Safari that reminds me of their golden years. That being said, I cannot wait to finish off the 2020 lineup reviews with this model, so let's go ahead and take a closer look, starting as we always do, with the head. Now, easily the most notable feature on the head of this model, and quite possibly one of the most notable aspects about it in general, is you can see that Safari have included the recently announced fleshy crest of Edmontosaurus. This crest was sort of like the comb of a rooster, and you can see Safari went to great lengths to capture that feel, going so far as to sculpt in the pebbled texture that we often see on rooster combs. The facial structure of the animal is also quite nice. You can see that it all flows down into that beak, which does feature some nice texture and a lovely gradation of color from the base to the tip. The eye is strikingly done and sits quite nicely into the head of the model, and you can see that all the lovely forms on the face of this Edmontosaurus have been adorned with delicate scale textures. Also worth noting is once again Safari have added some gloss to the nostrils as well, which is always a nice detail that adds an extra element of life to their models. The mouth is closed yet again, but I think it looks very nice on this model. It gives it a very peaceful look that adds to the graceful nature of the overall sculpt. The head of this model is just all around fantastic. I love the forms, the crest, the details. All of it comes together to form an elegant and eye-catching design that looks fantastic from all angles. Going down the length of the body, you can see that once you hit the back of the head, there is a different style in scales with larger, more carved-in circular scales adorning the remaining 85% of the animal. You have got some lovely bunching up and folding of the skin as the creature lifts and turns its head ever so slightly to the right, and you have also got some lovely bunching up of the skin around the limbs and the gut. The tail is quite broad and long, and you can see that the scale details continue all the way down to the tip. I really dig the sculpt work on this model. It's the perfect balance of texture and form. I'm particularly fond of the treatment of the skin around the gut and legs on the left side of the animal. I don't know what specifically I like about it. I've seen this kind of thing a lot before, but it has been handled quite nicely on this sculpt, almost as nicely as that gorgeous head. Moving along the underbelly, you can see that the detail down here is by and large the same, save for the inside of the legs. You have got some seams, which is something I don't really recall noticing on any Safari figures. I'll have to look at my collection now that I've seen that here, but anywho, you've also got all the copyright information there, and then just past the hind limbs you can see the cloaca has been sculpted in at the base of the tail. The arms and legs of this Edmontosaurus feature a lovely transition in scale detail from the bicep down to the feet, with a larger scale shrinking down into finer covering. The musculature is also quite nice on the limbs. Something that is worth noting, you can see that the front feet are kind of smoothed over in terms of claws. It looks like this Edmontosaurus is wearing mittens, as a matter of fact. But there was recently a find that showed us that Edmontosaurus actually had a single hoof-like sheath that covered the individual fingers, something akin to that of a horse, and that find just really demonstrates how our knowledge of these animals is so constantly shifting and evolving. It happens so fast that sometimes we can't even design toys nowadays without something coming out to render the ideas that go into our new models as obsolete. It's one of the incredible things about dinosaurs and paleontology. So no shame to Safari for not being able to swing that feature on this model. We're just learning things faster than we can replicate them. The back legs look very powerful. There is some very robust musculature in the calves and thighs of the animal, and I'm also very fond of how the skin is buckling and folding over that bending left foot. You can see it there just above the brown painted toe claws. It's great to see these models capturing motion in a way that is sensible to how the body would move and compensate in life. As far as the pose of this model goes, it's nothing too exciting, not nearly as active as their previous Edmontosaurus, but also not stiff like some of their other 2020 offerings like the Pachycephalosaurus. You can see this Edmontosaurus is in mid-stride with one front arm bending slightly off the ground while the back legs brace it and stride forward. The head is held low to the ground and craning off to the right as if this Edmontosaurus is eyeing some sort of tasty morsel as it goes through its daily grazing session. There's a level of grace that Safari captured with this pose, but it also preserves that resting power that's ready to be released should the animal need to spring into action at any given moment. What can I say? I like it a lot. I think it's very well done. The paint scheme is also very well balanced on this model, and to my knowledge represents some of our modern understanding of how this animal would have appeared in life thanks to some Edmontosaurus dino mummies that have been discovered. You can see it is largely tan with a dark brown/black color running the length of the dorsal region and tapering down onto the legs while also patterning the midsection with spots and banding the tail in stripes. This is the element that I believe is based off of recent findings, the banding of the tail, and it's great to see Safari taking that as inspiration for this model. Another stroke of genius is saving the splash of color for the crest on the head. That red really does make it look like a rooster's comb. And I'm also fond of the striping on the face. Those elements, the red and the striping on the face, really work to tie the whole thing together. The one thing I do not like about the color scheme is the sort of fleshy tones that come up from the neck onto the face. I think it kind of gives this Edmontosaurus an embarrassed look, like he saw something he shouldn't have, and now he's blushing. I don't know, I could have done without that subtle color transition, but it is what it is, and it's an overall minor complaint in the grand scheme of things. As far as the size of this model goes, it is the biggest of this year's lineup in terms of dinosaurs, coming in at 10 inches long, or about 25.5 centimeters from tip of tail to tip of snout. Then from the ground to the top of the hips, this Edmontosaurus measures in at right around 3 3/4 inches off the ground, or 9.5 centimeters. So yes, certainly a large model relative to this year's lineup, but certainly not among the largest that Safari has to offer. For size comparisons, here it is next to the former Edmontosaurus offering from Safari, and no doubt this is an overall improvement both in terms of size and detail. I personally don't mind the more active pose of the previous offering, but for those of you who like a nice, tranquil dinosaur model, this new Edmontosaurus is going to be a welcome change to the former. Next up for size comparison, here it is next to another fan favorite, the Gyprosaurus, a gorgeous model from Safari, which when you stand them face to face puts up a decent fight in terms of the size. But when you stand them more in front of each other, you can see that there really is no contest. The Edmontosaurus edges it out. Hopefully, if you have the Gypro, you should be able to get a better idea of the size you can expect from Ed here. Next up for size comparison, I did it again. I brought in the 2017 Feathered T-Rex. I don't think these two quite size up, but it is still cool to see them side by side. In my opinion, they're both the best Safari had to offer in the years that they came out, and it's nice to see some predator-prey comparisons as well. And finally, for size comparison, here it is next to the also new for 2020 Safari Ltd Pachycephalosaurus, which I just reviewed on the channel. Link will be down below, but yeah, I quite enjoyed that model, but seeing them side by side, yeah, no contest. The Edmontosaurus takes the Pachycephalosaurus by storm in every department, so if that's any indication of my overall thoughts on this model, then there you go. So there you have it, guys. That is going to do it for my look at the new for 2020 Safari Ltd Edmontosaurus. And yeah, I absolutely love this model. I don't know if it's because I was just kind of lukewarm to so many of the other offerings this year, or if this one really is just that good, but either way, it is certainly a standout and one that I cannot recommend enough. Yes, it is a wee bit pricey relative to everything else, but I will say that I think it is worth it. The sculpt is fantastic, the sizing is quite nice, I love the paint, and it is a wonderful update of a classic species that too often gets shoved aside as mere T-Rex fodder. Overall, I think this Edmontosaurus is dynamite, and it is easily my favorite of this year's lineup. But now that I've said that, you know what time it is. Yes, for those of you that made it this far, since this is the last Safari Ltd 2020 figure I plan to review, you get to hear my personal ranking complete with some final thoughts on this year's offerings. You lucky dog. If you're not interested in watching all the reviews I filmed, which will be linked in the description by the way, then this should be a good place to start if you are wondering which models you should get and in what order. So here we go, the Safari 2020 prehistoric models ranked. At number 7, the Dilophosaurus. Yeah, this one is a bit underwhelming to say the least. It's so small that there really isn't a lot of room for interesting details, and to add insult to injury, the paint job is a bit bland. Ultimately, there's just nothing really eye-catching about this model, so even if you do pick it up, it'll probably wind up just getting lost in the shuffle of your display. Number 6 is a bit of a toss-up, and I could see myself kind of switching this one with number 5 from day to day depending on my mood, but for now I will say number 6 placement goes to the Concavinator. Talk about a letdown. I think this figure wound up a little boring from the promo images to the final product. The paint scheme is just not that interesting, and the skull shape feels off. That being said, the detail is a bit better than that of the Dilophosaurus, and I really like the pose on it. Honestly, if they had just reworked that skull and maybe opened the mouth, this one easily could have been higher on the list. Number 5, the dinosaur I can see myself switching with the Concavinator from time to time, the Chianzusaurus. I think this one has some nice detail, the pose is nice, and I also like that it is sculpted with an open mouth. That being said, the paint job definitely suffered with this one from promo images to final products, possibly more so than the Concavinator, and the teeth work is just killing me. Yeah, so kind of a weird situation between those two. Hard to say which one I recommend more or less. You know what? It's a tie. At number 4, we have the Shringosaurus. This model actually turned out better than I expected based on the promo images. There's some great detail at work here, and I dig the paint job. Safari also gets my praise just for giving such a wacky creature the spotlight this year, and I hope this puts the ball in motion for other companies to do the same for this species and any other that could use a model made after them. I may not like the hands or the treatment of the mouth, but I still think this is definitely a model worth supporting in the long run. At number 3, quite possibly my biggest surprise of the year, we have the Pachycephalosaurus. I didn't think I was going to like this one, but lo and behold, it actually turned out to be among my top 3. The sculpt of the head is near perfect, and I love the color scheme on it. My biggest concern is that it does look a bit stiff in terms of its positioning, and like the Edmontosaurus, it does feel a bit expensive. But ultimately, I do think it is worth it. I mean, if I didn't, I wouldn't have bought it. Then again, it did help me get free shipping, so I'm sure that had something to do with it. But I'm glad I did it because I got to see how great it was in person, okay? The runner-up of this year is the Dakota Raptor, I mean the Deinonychus, another gorgeously feathered dromaeosaur from Safari. This model features a lot of great sculptural detail, and an enjoyable and naturalistic paint scheme to boot. I will say that I do enjoy the pose, but it does suffer from some balancing problems, so that is something to be wary of if you add this bird to your collection. And of course, you all heard me say it, my favorite dinosaur from the year from Safari is this awesome Edmontosaurus. If you want to hear any of my thoughts on that one, you can just rewind the video a little, but overall, I do think this year was a much better showcase than last, and I am excited to see what Safari has down the road. One thing I certainly hope for is some more variations between open and closed mouth models, and I also hope for a more varied color palette between the models. Yeah, looking at them all here, very uniform in terms of color choice. Here's to hoping Safari's 2021 is as good, if not better, than their 2017. As always, I want to know what you guys think of this year's lineup and of today's model, the Edmontosaurus. Which of these figures do you own, and which are you planning to pick up? What's your personal rankings? Do you have any hopes/predictions for the 2021 lineup? Drop a comment down below. As always, thank you so much for tuning into today's review. As I said, this will do it for Safari. Next time, we're going to be getting into some Collect Day figures, so be sure to stick around for that. Thanks again, and take care out there. Killer Shrew Fan, out.